What's going on for victims and villains? My name is Josh, aka Captain Nostalgia, and today we are jumping into our coverage of this year's GalaxyCon. Now, we got to interview a few creators, talk to them about their projects and how art really affects their mental health, practical mental health things that they do to keep good mental health, along with getting to see the world premiere of You Can Call Me Bill, which is actually going to kick it off. And I had a chance to go see this movie with Alan from You Have to Watch This Podcast and Brilliant But Lazy, which you guys can catch right here on the Victims and Villains Podcast Network. If you guys are interested in any of these projects, links for everyone is going to be in the show notes below. Thank you to GalaxyCon for having us this year. Thank you to everyone that made this episode possible. And as always, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, click the links in the description below to check out our mental health resource library. We'll be back this Wednesday with a brand new episode of Abyss Gazing. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Hi, this is the voice of Alan Cram, co-host of Brilliant But Lazy, the pop culture podcast here on the Victims and Villains Podcast Network. And I'm with Captain Nostalgia himself, who is currently driving, but we just got out of the world premiere screening of You Can Call Me Bill with William Shatner, the Legion M film that made its debut here in Richmond for GalaxyCon. We had a chance to talk to Mr. Shatner himself. I'm going to call him Bill. The movie told me to. But yeah, we just got out of the screening. So, Josh, right off the bat, what were your thoughts of You Can Call Me Bill?
It is a movie that I can appreciate, but it's a very niche audience. I feel like this was made with those that grew up on Star Trek or introduced kids to Star Trek or in the Star Trek fandom, and that was a boat that I missed and I've never really gotten into. So for me, I appreciate it, like the vulnerability, the philosophical musings of it, but it felt like a very targeted demographic for this particular documentary.
For me, I don't even think you have to be a fan of Star Trek to understand what's going on in this film. If you wanted any insight at all into William Shatner the man, this film provides that. It might be confusing and it may not make much sense, but it's very much off the cuff, very philosophical, very much the philosophy of William Shatner plays out in this a lot more than this is my life story. It doesn't go beat by beat of this is what it was like growing up. This is what it was like doing Star Trek. This was like doing Miss Congeniality. It jumps around and talks about yeah. Well, they didn't. That's like the one thing they didn't show clips of was miscongeniality.
Might not have been able to get the rights to it.
They were able to get the rights to everything else. So there's clips of Boston Legal and the Priceline commercials, but it's very much of the. You get to know William Shatner a bit. My friend Bill. The man loved my shirt, so I'm going to live with that for the rest of my life. We had the chance to talk to William Shatner before the screening. He hadn't seen the film yet, and I was able to ask him, what does he want people to take away from this film? And his answer was, I want them to be entertained. And I think at the end of the day, this film is entertaining for the most part, but there are moments that seem a bit preachy, which is fine, but it does drag on a bit, and there were some strange editing choices that I saw in the film with the way they play with aspect ratio, because they use so much stock footage from Star Trek and stuff older than Star Trek, stuff from the 40s and 50s that he was in, the old westerns. They play with the aspect ratio, and the stuff that they shot with him in a studio where it's him being interviewed today is full screen, like widescreen, but then they branch it back out from the 4:3 aspect ratio, which I found a bit distracting in spots. Did you catch any of that stuff, or?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't catch it. I didn't mean it to. It didn't come across as distracting to me. I think going off of what you were talking about, where it feels like there's a little bit of like a tonal inconsistency to it, I think is kind of was some of the biggest problems I have, because you have these moments where he's talking about these like really deep philosophical things like life and death and religion, but then he gets into talking about climate control and then how to be a perfect like stand-up and like the art of comedy, and you know, it felt like really inconsistent to me. And like I there were things, again, it's a documentary that I appreciated about it. It's like you were saying, like you got to really know him. This felt very vulnerable. I was surprised by how deep it got, especially for a publication that addresses mental health. I think this is like a deep, like really naked look into the icon of who William Shatner is as a person, but it also, in that personification, it also shows the flawed, and I think that flawed carries out in how the film lays out the narrative and how it lays out certain choices, like whether you, like what you're talking about with editing or how everything flows together. Does it ever bother you when you have a film that has like title cards that's like chapter 1, chapter 2? Because this is a film that has those, and that to me was a little bit distracting, because it felt like a series of short films rather than just an all-out like natural flow to the order of things.
When you get into documentary, sometimes you don't always have a script of what the film is going to be when you sit down to do it. What this seems like was they put William Shatner in a room for a day and talk to him, and then, okay, we're going to make a film out of that. And the best way to do that is to break it up by chapters and be like, okay, we're going to talk about the acting side of things. We're going to talk about the early childhood. We're going to break it up into chapters and put it together that way, in a way that it makes sense. So when it comes to documentary, it's not necessarily distracting for me. It's one of the ways that the art form of documentary works is you don't know what you have until you're in the edit. A lot of documentaries are made in the editing process, and that's probably a choice that they made in editing, because it seems like they've been working on this for a few years, because some of the footage from a few weeks before his main interview, people were still wearing COVID masks in the shots. So it's a long process, but I think when you see that, it's more of a bringing the story together in a cohesive way. And I think breaking it up into chapters and focusing on the different ideas that he's talking about in the film worked for me. So
I feel like it would have worked for me a little bit more had they kind of related to one another, like had a stronger flow where it just kind of seemed like it was like a stream of consciousness where director was like call to action and just kind of let him talk about whatever he wanted to, and they attempted to just kind of make a film around those musings, and it just, to me, it didn't work. And like that's kind of one of the lower parts of the documentary for me. But again, this documentary emotionally, I think it hits really well. It leaves the audience with a lot to consider, a lot to think about. And just thematically, it's a lot deeper than I was expecting it to be, and it was also a lot funnier than I was expecting it to be.
Yeah, the segment where he talks about how comedy works for him and timing, I think I got more out of that than a whole college course I took on comedy. It's almost a master class in the middle of this film, just talking about how timing works and what happens when it doesn't. But I think William Shatner is a one-of-a-kind talent, whether it's Captain Kirk or the Priceline Negotiator. There's no one else who does what William Shatner has done in his career. And this is a very fun and interesting way of looking at his career and the man himself. It's not just, look, I did this, look, I did that.
He's also very surprisingly really humble. And like you got that, like and that's one of the things that like I picked up doing the red carpet tonight, is that he's a very like genuine kind of guy, and I'm glad the filmmakers didn't set out to like portray this like false facade of him, but they like caught the genuine nature of who Shatner is as a person at his core.
Yeah, he was very excited. He seemed excited to be there.
Yeah.
And for a man who's in his 90s, very spry. Like, I was very impressed by the way he conducted himself for his age. Because when they said 90 in the clips of him going into space, it's like, that was 2 years ago. So he's got to be 92 at this point. It's impressive that he's still doing cons and doing premiere events like this. Because I know Sunday he's doing this again with Neil deGrasse Tyson in New York. And I keep seeing ads for a screening in LA with Kevin Smith. So he's out there and making the best of life. So more power to him.
He talks in the documentary too that like this is the busiest that he's ever been in his life too. Like he's making more now than he ever has, and whether that's content or there's a portion in the documentary where it also like it gives a segment to his like him being a grandfather and like wanting to see his grandkids grow up and see what they become and how their lives kind of branch out. Like I also really appreciated that, but yeah, the dude's like still kicking over 90. I hope I have that energy.
He has definitely lived long and prospered. I had to go there. One of my favorite moments of the night, though, was as we were about to interview him, a fan gave him a piece of art from Star Trek, and it had Spock on it. He's like, "This is great, but that's the wrong guy." Like,
also glad the documentary commented on like the cultural impressions that they've made.
Yes, the William Shatnerisms. Yeah. There's something on the wing. Something. Yeah, the Shatner impression that everyone does, probably a lot better than I just did. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say. If you're a fan of William Shatner, I think this documentary is definitely worth checking out. If you're on the fence about Shatner and Star Trek maybe not for you. But I highly recommend at least the portion on comedy for anyone who's interested in comedy and has enjoyed anything that Shatner has done comedically, because I think he gets overlooked as a comedic genius, and I think it's there, and just not a lot of people see him for that.
Yeah, I would even go as far as to say that even if you are on the fence, this documentary may push you over into being a fan. Like, I'm not the biggest Shatner fan, but there was a lot about this documentary that I walked away with a new respect for him, really enjoyed it, was entertained. It's somewhat a little bit kind of messy at times, but we're putting this on the Rorschach rating scale. I'm giving this a 3. Where would this land for you?
I haven't done the Rorschach rating in a while. But over on Brilliant But Lazy, we do Brilliant or Lazy. Okay. I'm going to say Brilliant, but I think there's a lot of great things here. It does drag on in spots, but I think at the core of it, there's a very interesting story here, and very personal insight into the man, the myth, the legend, Captain James T. Kirk himself, William Shatner. So I guess that would relate to like a 4.
Okay. That's fair. See, but you're a Star Trek fan. I feel like Star Trek fans will appreciate this documentary more than me.
Even not being a Star Trek... there's not much about Star Trek in here.
There's not.
It's a lot... Like, there's not stories of, like... There's this one time where DeForest Kelley and I and Leonard Nimoy... Like, there's none of that. It focuses more on his philosophy of life and of acting and of being an entertainer. So...
The last thing I will say, though, is if you get a chance to see this movie, watch it. But if not, you don't want to watch the movie, find the comedy bit, for one. And 2, seek out his opening for the AFI George Lucas Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yes.
It's great.
Yes, it very, very much is.
I'm here with Joe and Mercedes. They are a couple that create comics together. So how are you guys doing today?
Good, man. It's been a great show. We got here Thursday set up, and yesterday we just been kind of rocking and rolling the whole weekend. So yeah, it's been good. What do you think?
I would say about the same. Things have been good. It's been steady, and we're having a good time.
So I got to ask, because it's not every day you guys get to meet a couple that creates content together. What came first, the work or the relationship?
I would say the work came first. The work led to us meeting. We actually met working on the 3rd issue of Tales of Cape Fear. So, we walked into a meeting and, shook hands and became friends and started drawing together and kind of spring-rolled from there. So, yeah.
All right. So tell me a little bit about the Hellfire-Verdict, which is one of the comics here that you're talking about today.
So Hellfire-Verdict's written by Dan Alvarez. He's a Canadian author who wrote this story about 4 everyday individuals who mask up and become vigilantes, and they take a corrupt politician and put him kind of on a kangaroo court, to bring him to justice. So there's no heroes or villains in the show or in the book. we don't applaud what they do. It's really left ambiguous up to the reader to decide whether or not they would agree with their means and their methods on how they mete out justice, if you will. So but it was released by Marcosi Enterprises in 2020. It's my first published work. So we come out to the convention circuit and try to spread the word, if you will, and get the book out there. So
if people aren't here at GalaxyCon this weekend, where would they be able to find this? Can they pick this up online? Can they read it digitally?
Absolutely, yeah. You can pick it up through Comixology. You can order it through, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Walmart, anywhere that, you can purchase books from. You could also buy it from local comic shops if they carry it. I know we're from Wilmington, North Carolina. Our local comic shop, Memory Lane, carries it. But I mean, it's pretty much sold through every major retailer.
Now, Mercedes, you are the author on Tales of Cape Fear?
on a couple of the stories. So Tales of Cape Fear is an anthology series. A bunch of local writers and artists get together every year and put together stories based on local lore and locations surrounding the Cape Fear area. So I've got a couple of short stories. I've been a part of this project since 2020, and my partner since, what would you say, the year before that?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just a compilation of a lot of different short stories. I've got a couple of stories that I've written, and I've been an artist in all but one issue.
With anthologies, especially one that is very particular to a particular location, particular mythologies, and kind of like legends, what's the research process like?
So I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself personally on the last story that mine had a lot to do with the culture of the Gullah Geechee people, and so it was a lot of finding firsthand accounts, learning their lore, learning about the culture that is unfortunately slowly fading in the area. So, a lot of it is interviewing and speaking to local people that I already know. A lot of that is getting into the internet, finding people who study these things as well. But I think most of all, it is kind of taking us back to the folk story side of things, where it's a story you've heard before, it's a legend that you know because you live in the area and you're able to go in and get more detail.
So obviously a story like that's a little bit more heartbreaking and a little bit more emotionally heavy than Vigilantes. What are some practices that you have in terms of taking care of your own mental health to kind of separate yourself from that work?
Honestly, for me, I find that finding the ways that I can take action and kind of letting go of the things that I can't currently affect help. For me, if there's a way to monetarily help a situation, great, I'll do that. If there's a way to get my hands in the dirt, so to speak, and get involved with a community that's having issues, a community I've read about and I've been able to spread the word about, then that's what I do. I feel like I heal a bit through doing the work connected to what I'm learning that is absolutely heartbreaking.
All right, so what are, I'm going to ask this question, this is going to be the theme of this episode in GalaxyCon interviews. What are some mental health practices that you guys do to kind of do rest or kind of keep yourself in a healthy mental health space?
For me, I feel like I use my artwork to kind of stay above water, if you will. I've been drawing all my life, and it's where I find my relaxation. It's something I love doing. It's something that helps inspire me to push forward. We all suffer burnout. We all suffer, depression, self-doubt. For me being an artist, I suffer a lot of imposter syndrome, for instance, because I feel like I'm surrounded by some of the top artists in the world at an event like this, whether it's, through illustration or whether you're the top artist in your field of acting or I just sometimes feel like, man, do I even belong here? But we have people that come to the table and, we have stickers that make them laugh. We have books that pique their interest. We have artwork that's like, oh man, I grew up watching that show, and that's why I do it. At the end of the day, I can come here and, make a few bucks and it helps pay the rent. But if I make nothing, I still get those experiences. And for me, that's a really big booster for my mental health because it makes me feel like there's a reason to move forward the next day.
Almost like being seen and like heard.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much of a, selfishly it is a little bit of an ego booster, but I think that, in this field, you kind of need that sometimes, to kind of move forward. It just, I don't know, it feels good to, like you said, be seen. And I'm seen by this wonderful human being every day. And we really supported each other through our artwork, but coming out here and meeting complete strangers who you can make that connection with, just makes you feel whole as an individual, I guess, So, might sound a little dramatic, but for me, that's what makes sense.
And same question.
I'd say I've got to reiterate the connection, whether that's connection with other people or honestly, as woo as it sounds, connection with nature. I like to get out sometimes when I can with my art, go to the beach. We live at the beach, so go to the beach, sketch some things there, go on a walk to kind of get out of my own head, get out of my bubble. And the same for, the connection, getting out of my own bubble and connecting with other artists and other people that consume the media that we're into. And I really think connection is what it boils down to for me as far as, keeping my own mental health in check and, the practices we do.
All right, so I asked Joe this, but for Tales of Cape Fear, is it available online?
You can actually find Tales of Cape Fear through the talesofcapefear.com website. We are currently wrapping up book 5, so when the Kickstarter begins, we would love to have all of the support you can give us on that, kind of get it out of the door. But we are also working on a trade version that's going to have several of these issues all together. Because it's an anthology, though, if you were to order any of the issues, you don't have to go and order all of the short stories in there. If they're connected, they're vaguely connected.
All right, so where can people find you guys online?
On Instagram is probably where I display the most of my work. I'm at Joe Kovas, Covas Creates. So at Joe Kovas Creates is where I'm at.
And I'm at Mercy Nickel, MERCYNICKEL on Instagram. You can also follow Tales of Cape Fear and all of the artists and writers responsible for that piece at Tales of Cape Fear on Instagram as well.
Yeah. All right, thank you, guys. I'm here right now with Rod Van Blake. He is the writer and author behind the fantasy series.
Fantasy series and sci-fi series. There's 2 different ones.
All right, so tell us, the Nyumbani-Chronicles, did I say that right?
Nyumbani-Chronicles is a fantasy series about, basically I have the Orisha, the West African gods of Yoruba that rule over Nyumbani, and there's a magus or a wizard who loses his love in battle, and a god creeps up on him and says, I can bring her back to you if you raise a remnant army in my name. Not a smart thing, but because he thinks he's about to do, he agrees to it, and when he starts to do that, it corrupts magic, and he inadvertently wakes up 3 elder dragons who use magic to hibernate. So when their sleep is disturbed, they get angry, they come up seeing what's going on. The gods look down, see a blight going across the world, and everybody's looking for this wayward magus. So that's Nyumbani-Chronicles, how that story kind of starts out. And then we have 2 comic books based on the first couple chapters of that book. I have the second book out, Nyumbani-Chronicles 2, The Draconian Tribunal. And before that, I published my Ancient-Illumination science fiction series, but that's the first series. Nyumbani is my newest series.
So tell us a little bit about the Ancient-Illumination.
Ancient-Illumination is basically a what-if scenario about beings of pure light that come to Earth 68,000 years in the past to teach mankind. We're still in the stages of Cro-Magnon. One of them, of course, thinks we're too dumb, so he gets bored and says they're not going to get it. So he starts experimenting on mankind, that gets him in trouble. And as punishment, his kind exiles him here on Earth and forces him to stay behind to enlighten us. So we get a bunch of different mutant races. We get a bunch of technological advancements throughout history that happens as a result of him being here. And the mutants band together to try and find this alien to prove that he's the source of all of our conflicts. So it's a military action, space opera, sci-fi story that I wrote. I put the Marines in there because I'm a Marine veteran. So I had to add the military experience into it. It's kind of a jumble of all things, alternate history. But yeah, that's Ancient Illumination.
Can you talk about the challenges of not only world building, but also kind of bringing together multitude of subgenres and kind of making it feel like a thrilling epic?
That part I'm not sure how challenging. It's coming up with the things. I think fictional writing is kind of the most difficult because you do have to world build and create kind of from scratch. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything is kind of derivative, but you have to try and find a way to make your stories unique enough so it stands apart from whatever it is you've been consuming yourself. That's mainly the hard thing, is trying to make something unique when there's so many sci-fi and fantasy stories out there that have been done ad nauseum. It is the most difficult thing, but I kind of roll with it. Like I said, I kind of infuse some of my personal experience into it, so it's kind of personal to me. People that I run into throughout life experience, they might give me a version of them as a caricature of that person, so it's not the actual person, but I've kind of added my own little special sauce to a person. I may zhuzh them up and have them more extreme than they actually are in the stories, but you kind of have to do that to make the stories new and different, and that way it's tailored to me. And people that kind of came up with me will know where I got certain things from, or have experienced certain things that I've experienced will know where it's from, but it's unique to me. But it still is enough there to relate to a wide variety of people.
You talk about infusing some of your personal experience as a Marine and kind of the vulnerability that comes with writing stuff like that?
More or less the attitude, the jargon, the vernacular that we're kind of used to, the hurry up and wait. People that have been in the military will know what that's about. Command knowing things that the lower tier people will not know, the enlisted may not know what's going on. We're just kind of, so that attitude and having to deal with those things are infused into my stories as well. So it's not necessarily, I'm not a combat vet, I'm communications, so it's not necessarily that experience that comes into it, but the overall attitude and what we had to deal with in the day-to-day kind of drudgery of being in the military, in addition to the dangers and other things that we deal with, are kind of in the stories as well.
So going back to the Nyumbani-Chronicles, I apologize. Can you you mentioned that a lot of the lore comes from African folklore?
Well, we get the same pantheon of gods, in my opinion. We get the Norse gods, we get Celtic gods, we get the Greek and Roman versions of gods. If they do touch Africa, it's usually the Egyptian gods. So I don't see as many of the Orisha used a lot. So I wanted to use a different pantheon to give a different feel and experience to the fantasy genre. Olorun, Oya, Shango, Babalo Aye. These different versions that have existed and basically have kind of been changed into other things, but not claiming them as what they are in other lore. I wanted to use that lore because it's kind of different, We're doing Anansi. We've seen Anansi a time, American Gods. I love that story, but then for whatever reason they stopped using him in season 3. So I wanted to give a different feel and my own spin on the fantasy genres. That's kind of like what we've seen before, but different yet still at the same time.
What were some of the challenges moving from a sci-fi story into a fantasy story?
Not very different at all. The difference mainly being that science fiction has to be foundationally based on science, whereas magic and things that can't be explained all the time are what governs fantasy. So I have a scientific rule that rules my science and the mutants and where they come from, the beings made of pure light. I came up with that because when I was a kid, we taught about matter, and there were 3 forms of matter, but now they're teaching plasma as a 4th form of matter. So it became a what if of what if there were organic beings made of pure light, because a unit of light, a photon, is kind of gaseous, solid, liquid, and plasma all at the same time in one unit. Well, what if there was a sentient being made of that? And so that's kind of how the what if scenario built from there, whereas it's based solely on magic on the fantasy side, and it just depends on kind of like how the Force is. Some people have it, some people don't, but in my book it's called Unasifiwa, which is the gift in Swahili. So that's where magic comes from. So either you have the gift or you don't. And then there's just various stages of it. So you could be a demigod if you were half god, half human, then you would have obviously a lot of it, and you'd be able to, or you have none of it because you're just all human, or a god could gift it to you, or you're naturally just born with it. So there's different tiers to the magic levels in the fantasies, and that's mainly the difference. Like with fantasy, I can say the magic words, there's nothing in my hand, and then when I say these words, something magically appears in my hand. Those are the rules type of thing. Now, if you veer from those rules, then readers are going to be upset with you. If you have like a genie and you have 3 wishes from the genie, and you all of a sudden give your protagonist a 4th wish and break your own rules, then they're going to be upset about it. So that's really the kind of difference. You have to know what the difference between the genres are and what governs what's happening within the world. And of course you can have what I think Star Wars is a mix of the two.
So one of the last things I'm trying to talk to independent creators about this weekend is what are ways that you do for yourself that keep you in a healthy mental health space?
Me, I work out and I take time off. I read and do the things because that's kind of what got me into writing, was reading a lot. That's kind of my escape, in addition to movies and things like that, and video games. Even though I'm old as hell, I'll be 50 at the end of the year, I still play games. So I can shoot up stuff and beat folks up on a digital plane and not in real life, so I don't get in any trouble. So that kind of gives my brain a break and allows me to take time and reset kind of mentally for the real world.
All right, well, where can people pick up the books online, and where can they read them, check them out?
ancient-illumination.net is my website. You can get both series of literary novels and comics and graphic novels at ancient-illumination.net.
All right, Rod, well, I thank you for your time, and go check out both series.
Appreciate you.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I'm here with Charlie. He is I guess I probably should have asked this before we started, but you are the writer, artist on comic.
Creator of
Spider-Squirrel-and-Trash-pand. Tell us a little bit about these books.
Spider-Squirrel-and-Trash-pand is a buddy cop action comedy. It's kind of a modern throwback superhero book. It's a lot of fun. The biggest thing is it's really a book kind of based on my personality about, I act like I take nothing seriously, but I really take everything seriously. And it's such a great release for me to kind of exhibit a way to go throughout the world, which is always serious, and laugh in the face of things and be stoic sometimes and really kind of keep yourself centered. So for me, it's a nice way to show that in a comic book form.
So I got to ask, with a name like Trash Panda, does it come from Guardians?
No, actually. So before Guardians came out, this was already in production. We'd already started, because I built this for about 3 years before I finally went on Kickstarter. And in the middle of that, of course, Guardians of the Galaxy came out, and that's fine. But no, my buddy's a Marine, Jeremy. He's a retired Marine, now discharged. He had a condition, and we joked about him he was a big raccoon thing, and Trash Panda, we started calling him Trash Panda, and it kind of stuck, and he's the model for the actual character. So it really came from my buddy.
It's not every day that I get to interview somebody that has a little bit of comedy interjected into it. Obviously, your banner behind you is whether or not pineapple should go on pizza. It's an ongoing joke. Can you talk about bringing in that breath of fresh air and kind of those more comedic moments into the mythology?
Yeah, I think, it's like I said earlier, it's kind of like my mantra in life is to laugh as much as possible. I think it's so healthy to laugh, and we as parents, with my wife, we have 7 kids, and I think throughout all the struggles of just parenting and living, whether it's financial struggles or whether it's raising a kid or kids, just learn to find those moments to laugh, because they become a reprieve in and of themselves. And so for me to write comedy and to kind of express it in a way that hopefully makes other people laugh is really important to me, because I think we need to laugh a little bit more, and I think it's healthier. It's proven that we release endorphins when we laugh and we smile. And so for me, it just means the world to know that people are out there reading this and they're telling me, hey, I found this as an LOL moment, or hey, this really made me smile, or I totally vibed on this and it's really made me laugh because something like this happened to me in real life. And to take those serious moments and to kind of exponentiate them into some weird comedic moment is everything. I think it's important.
So comedy is one of those things that can be literally a multitude of different audiences. Obviously, the things that make kids laugh aren't going to make adults laugh, and vice versa. So when you're writing the comedy aspect of it, and also kind of the adventure side of this, who's the audience that you have in mind for?
Most of the audience are just knuckleheads like me, really. If I'm going to giggle at it, I think somebody else might giggle at it. It's kind of a good 12 to 99-year-old humor. There's a little bit of everything in there. So, we'll have some butt jokes, and we'll have, actually in the most recent release, his entire costume gets ripped off. And so we have a nice little pixelated nethers, if you will. So a little bit of silly, goofy, maybe even sex jokes, but not raunchy, just mild. Why is the sock on the window and not on the doorknob, kind of a thing. So those moments are there. And then there's those, some dad jokes for sure, because, frankly, I'm a dad. And there's food jokes, and I don't know, there's all kinds of nonsense in there just to play a little bit of fun on a little bit of everything. So I won't say there's all kinds of humor, but I just say it's a nice gamut.
So the world of independent comics, you can have series that are limited, that will do 4 issues, they're done, told the story they want to tell. When you're setting out to write this particular story, what do you have in mind in terms of like the end goal?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I wrote the first arc as a miniseries, and I published it as such, and with the intention that if it was popular enough, I'd do more. And so I did a special, which we did, and I just released, and now I'm actually in the middle of writing volume 2. So I'll continue to do this as an indie ongoing. So it'll be like a series of mini-series, but it'll be an arc, and the numbers will be consistent. So the next issue is 4. But the end goal, I actually did, it's funny you asked, I actually wrote already the last Spider-Squirrel story, as I call it. That's the tentative working title. It's not going to be the final. And the... without being a big spoiler, the culmination of it is Spider-Squirrel talking about how everyone thinks he's a joke, how he's just a cornball, and he acts like that, and he talks like that. But at the end of it all, he's passionate about taking care of his people, taking care of the world, doing the right thing. And so it's a very serious, almost like a tearjerk kind of a moment for me personally when I'm writing it, because I do act like an idiot all the time. But I take everything seriously. I'm really passionate about my family, my neighborhood, my community, my world, and it'll come out in that last story.
You talk about balancing the emotions as a writer, and also like how to convey those emotions visually as an artist.
Yeah, I think of a moment. So I love slapstick. It's one of my favorite forms of comedy. My kids love slapstick, so it's it's kind of a nice family thing. I think having visual jokes and having a good art team that I can collab with is really critical. And DC Stolpner, who's the artist that I first started working with, is a master at crafting these visual expressions and these little subtle moments that just catch, because he gets the vibe of what I'm doing. I think I write some of it, but it really comes down to the art team. They're true collaborators, true co-creators, so I can't take all the credit for that. So if any of the humor's visual, some of it probably came from the art team, if not all of it.
So, stepping aside from the series, what are some ways that you, as an individual, take care of your own mental health, or would you advise listeners to take care of their mental health?
To be honest, I think cons are actually one of those ways. I get here, and my wife will tell you, I might eat 400 calories the whole weekend. I vibe off the energy of the people and the energy and the passion that they bring to the table, literally and figuratively. I look at the cosplayers and the amount of effort some of these folks put into it, and I look at the other co-creators, like the guys behind me, Pat and Stokes over here, who put together their own works, and it just fills me with a lot of energy. And I do go home exhausted, but it's almost a couch session for me. Like, I really love this, I do, and it's hopefully it comes out in my passion too. So it's just great. It's also great to talk to people about this and share it with my wife and so forth. So when I'm not at a con, writing is a great outlet. I've written so many stories that'll never get published because I just feel like I just need to dump it out there and just kind of exhaust myself onto paper, whether it's digital or physical paper. So I mean, comics is just another release, so if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get that, man. I'm the same way when we get a chance to do cons that are behind tables, so I get it. My last question is going to be, where can people find the books? Where can we support you, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I'm all over social media, so I'm pretty easy to find. It's Charlie McKelvey, MCELVY, pretty much at Charlie McKelvey anywhere. And you can also go to Zion Studios, Zion with an X, so XION Studios, plural, .com. I just put a new online shop up. I only have digital right now. I'll add some physical stuff later. And from there, you can contact me via contact form and stuff like that.
All right, well, I thank you for your time, sir.
Dude, thank you very much. I appreciate what you do.
Here is something you don't find every day. I am here with Michelle and Andrew Smart. They are the writer-artist couple behind moon-lair-studios that creates manga. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. Thanks.
So, you guys have an entire imprint. Can you guys talk about some of the projects that is underneath the imprint?
Yeah, sure. So currently we have four titles released. Go Oganzi is our main one. That was our first full-length manga volume. And then we have 2 issues of AK Yumi. Dasher Blue is coming later this year, but we've got the sneak peek already today. And then the V series, which is kind of our version of Shonen Jump.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, everything that she said. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
do the artwork for all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I co-write the stories.
All right. Well, how do you guys? Manga is traditionally a Japanese art that has had a huge blossom in the last 40 years here in the States. So, how do you guys kind of take something that is traditionally not American and bring your worldview on it, your backyard into it?
Yeah. I was going to say, actually, do you want to start this one off?
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up with manga. It was something that, and actually when I started kind of watching either cartoons or comics, like I noticed kind of the influence that kind of American comics and American kind of superheroes kind of had on kind of just the entertainment kind of world, just kind of all together. And so when I got into manga and anime, I knew it was different, but it still had that sort of, kind of creative freedom and kind of had that, just creativity to it. So for me, it's something, obviously, I'm an American, so I'm going to bring kind of my kind of own identity into it. But like the creative freedom I think that manga has is very kind of reflective on what like classic American cartoons had, like just pure imagination, pure escapism. And so that's something that I know for us, like we really want to kind of bring back that golden age of like manga where they were really kind of, going out there and just creating kind of whatever they wanted. So, yeah.
And some of the stuff, I mean, not everything we do is old school, but a lot of the stuff we do is inspired by those 80s, 90s, and early 2000s manga and anime. And during that time period, a lot of the stuff coming over to the U.S. had some similarities. Like there's, historical reasons why manga has a lot of influence from American comics, and now we see it going the other way where American comics are starting to have, take influences from manga. So as Americans, we're always going to put our kind of spin on it, like Andrew said, but, we really try to pay homage to that classic style.
So, Andrew, I got a question for you specifically since you brought it up. For American comics like, Tarzan, DC, Batman, Superman, the Golden Age is considered like the 1930s to like early 1950s. What would the Golden Age of manga be for you?
Oh, I would have to say like early 80s to early, I want to say early 2000, late 90s. For me, I mean, they just had some wild stuff. So I would think that's kind of the golden age of anime, and that's where like a lot of my style kind of comes from, just because again the creativity, and I feel like a lot of anime tropes were kind of born from those that time period that we kind of take for granted, or just sort of it's part of the anime aesthetic for those tropes, and I think those were born out of those that golden age of just creativity. So yeah.
All right, so question for you guys. So one of the things that I'm fascinated by, particularly about your project, is manga is notorious for having very long story arcs that take very long time to kind of come to completion. And when it comes to DIY comics, it sometimes can take years before you guys are able to actually kind of see that. So how do you guys kind of take that tradition of storytelling and bring that into the craft of DIY artistry and comics?
Well, I think part of it, first off, is, understandably, like any indie creator, we're going to be slower than the big guys. We're never going to be able to put books out as fast as they are. So part of it is just us taking our time. But the other thing, too, is that, with the manga classics, they are built into arcs. So although the overall or overarching story could take 200, 300, chapters, episodes, whatever, there are those pockets of time where you'll get, just 10 to 12 chapters, maybe even just 5. There's some really fantastic anime and manga series that are not that long. It's just that once people saw that they were a hit, they kept going with it.
Actually just sort of mixing kind of the traditional or the American side with it. We've actually started doing them in issue form. Yeah. I feel like that is the way we have to do it. Like, just being American, like doing it in issue form is really good. And I tell everybody all the time, like indie comics already kind of had its sort of like renaissance where in the beginning it was hard for people to kind of get things out. Now indie comics are kind of flourishing. I feel with indie manga, It hasn't had that renaissance yet. Like, in America, I mean, obviously people have been doing it, for a long time, but, not having that sort of stride, sticking to a story or one story for so long, I feel like is a very sort of like, manga traditional type of way, but with indie comics, like you do an issue, you put it out, you see how it goes. For us, we want to kind of put out as many different stories to kind of see what people like, but issue format is kind of the way we want to go.
So I was talking to Michelle about this before you were on Outdoor Dash,
I know.
as one does at a convention. But traditionally in this sphere, it's really rare to find an independent manga. So when you guys are stepping into cons, how do you guys stand out from like more traditional comic creators?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we try to make sure that we do is like I guess kind of focus on kind of those classic things. I mean, we definitely don't want to be in a box, but we're just I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to bring back that creativity. I mean, that's one way that I think we stand out. Another way is kind of on a DIY kind of thing, is like really encouraging creators to kind of, kind of take the bull, by the horn. A lot of this stuff we do in-house. We do the, we do the crafting, by hand. We do the design, obviously the story and the artwork. But that's something that I feel like we really want to encourage more creators to do and stuff. So, which is part of the indie kind of space, is just, doing it yourself, which I think Indie Comics did a really great job of doing and stuff.
So one of the things that we've been asking creators this weekend is, when it comes to your own mental health, what are some practices that you take to keep yourself in like healthy conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely take breaks. Take breaks, not just from drawing, but taking break from social media. Comparing yourself to people. Make sure that you're intaking things that you really kind of love. Some people just focus on the business aspect of it, or the money aspect of it, but like for us, like we have a great time. Like honestly, I find myself the happiest is when I'm creating. Like when I start feeling stressed, it's because I'm focusing on the competition of things like sales and all that stuff. But if you're a creator, that's what you love to do. Make sure you're filling your mind, your spirit with creations. And sometimes you have to like balance that out, because you don't want to spend all your time consuming content. You definitely want to make sure that you are producing, and but yeah, taking breaks off of social media, and making sure you're giving yourself that grace, especially as an indie. You have to give yourself that grace because you're doing everything by yourself. You're a social media person and stuff like that. Also get around like-minded people, stay away from negative people. Like, I know that sounds cliche, but seriously, like, make sure you're around people that not only will tell you that you're doing a great job, but if you're not doing a great job, they will say, hey, let me show you a different way, or, let me help you with this. So yeah, that's one way that we definitely, I keep myself sane.
So Michelle had to step out and take a phone call, but where can people find you online? Are we able to actually read these books online and support you guys?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's at moon-lair-studios.com. That's our main website. We are really active on Instagram. I believe it's moon-lair_studios on Instagram. And we have all of our books on the main website, either digital. You can purchase digital, or you can purchase physical. We're going to start putting out little sneak peeks, so you guys can kind of get kind of a good understanding of kind of all the different series. But yeah, that's basically where you can kind of find us. So.
All right. Well, I thank you so much. I don't know where your wife ran off to.
I'm so sorry.
But I thank you guys for your time. I thank you guys. You guys have a fascinating project here. Keep it up. And thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah.
I'm here with Anthony, the writer, artist, creator behind multitude of books. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
You got quite a array of stuff here. Can you kind of talk about what the some of the titles here are about?
Absolutely. So I have my first series, Decay. It's a revenge thriller. My other series, Gods Were Dead. It's a fantasy thriller. Oh my God, a fantasy series. I have Tap or Die, which is my wrestling series, and Intrusive Thoughts is actually about mental health. It's a hard supernatural mystery, and I have my other series, Exorcist Club, as well, which is a supernatural comedy, essentially.
You kind of talk about juggling a multitude of different genres and jumping into different worlds.
Oh yeah, I've always wrote in multiple areas, and I felt like essentially when I come to a con, the emphasis I want to be able to have something for everybody, and so as a point of emphasis, and I like working in different genres. I like different genres. I don't just consume one genre or medium. So I want to be genreless in a sense.
Do you have fun writing one genre over another?
Not really. No, it depends on the idea. It depends on the premise, the artist sometimes. Yeah, so it doesn't matter.
All right, well, let's jump into some of these titles real quick. Decay, give us a quick rundown. What's it about?
Absolutely. It's a supernatural revenge thriller. It's about a guy that gets killed at a house party, wrong place, wrong time. His sister brings him back to life, and he gets revenge.
Intrusive Thoughts, you talked about it being mental health based. Can you kind of talk about some of the influences there and where that story comes from?
Influences, it's kind of like a Gaiman thing. My first series, Decay, it was very literal. This is more of a metaphorical kind of direction. And basically the premise is about an orphan, never met his parents, gets dropped off at a police station when he's 3 years old, 2 years old. And he's got anxiety, depression, sleep paralysis, and his sleep paralysis demon breaks out of his head and bites his classmates. So it's it's about mental health. Just dress it up with like genre stuff,
At wrestling, you have Tap or Die here. What are you an independent wrestling fan or a major wrestling fan?
I would say major. Yeah, major wrestling fan.
Favorite wrestler?
You talking about who? My favorite wrestler? Oh, it's Stone Cold. That's what I grew up with for sure. How you doing?
Last title we got here is Exorcist Club. Can you kind of tell about jumping into the world of supernatural horror comedy and kind of balancing the two?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I kind of just write whatever feels right. I just trust my instincts. It's hard to, you kind of just get into the flow of things.
All right. So my last question for you is going to be, as an individual, what are some ways that you kind of take care of your own mental health?
I really don't. It's unfortunate. I wish it was something I did take care of more. I'm just kind of in the grind of things, in the flow of things, but it's something I should put more of an emphasis on, certainly.
Where can people find the books online?
decay-comic.com.
Well, thank you for your time, sir.
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem.